There are over 100 different gemstones that come in the color of green. Diamonds, emeralds, jade, even sapphire. But peridot is the only gemstone that comes in one color, green, from a beautiful yellowish green to the most highly valued olive green. So if you know someone who loves the color green, peridot might be the stone for you. Discover the value of your story. Increase. So this award lets me know that good morning. Bonjour. Comment ça va? Et toi? Ça va très bien. Ni hao. Hola. Bienvenue. Wan Ying, bienvenidos, bienvenita, benvenuta, namaste, and welcome. Welcome to another exciting episode of Gem Hunter Stories. My name is Barry B. Mixon, and I am a gemmological storyteller. And each and every week, I get the magnificent opportunity to take you on an adventure. Take you to places you've never heard before. Take you to let you hear stories that you've never heard before. Each week, what I do is I take the art, science, history, and magic of gemstones, precious metals, and fine jewelry, and I put them all together into a story. I've learned over the many years that many of the same characteristics that you see, so many of the same characteristics, the traits, the attributes that you see in gemstones, precious metals, and fine jewelry, you can see in people. It manifests in people. So what I do is I take those gem stories and use them as a template, as an inception point, as a bridge to help people, to empower people, and oftentimes to remind people to discover the value of their own stories, of not only their stories, but how they resonate with other people, how those stories affect you, not only now, but in the future. Barbara, cut the background music for me. Today, I had all kinds of slides. Literally, I took all kinds of pictures that I was going to use for today's show. And as most of you know, I'm in London. I'm right back in France right now. And, Murphy was in full effect today. So those pictures we're not able to put down today. So to those of you watching, especially for the students that I just finished training, this is how you tell a story a cappella. So let me start from the beginning. I had the last 4 days. First of all, happy birthday to everyone born in October. Myself, my Bryson Boogie, born in October, Charlie Jones, Joanne, so many people that I know and love were born in this month. So first of all, happy birthday to you. As I was going through this month, and especially in the last 4 days, the birthstone for October is opal. And when you think about an opal and all the multitudes of colors, as I said to you, what an opal actually is a gemstone that's made from rainwater. So over rainwater dropping over millions and millions of years, seeps down into the cracks of silicon dioxide, which basically is sand. And as the water starts to dry up, those silicon dioxide beads form in different patterns. And over time, those patterns harden and become an opal. And when you dig up an opal, there's actually two types of opals. There's precious opal and there's common opal. Common opal is beautiful in and of itself, but it's usually one color. Whereas precious opal, that's the opal that has the variety of different colors, as they call it, a play of colors. And I was thinking to myself as I was really getting ready for this show and just experiencing this month, how similar our lives are to opal. People ask me all the time, especially this trip, I met so many new people, and people ask me, what do you do? And what I do ultimately is teach about value, stories and value. And the only way you get to value is by virtue of your story. It is the most important, in my mind, it is the most important thing that you can ever learn in your life. In fact, when people ask me, what do? I love it because I have to reflect back to what stories mean to me. How do my own stories affect me? So I got invited by Joanne McGrew, who is the leader, the president of Amos, which is a sports business school in London, to come. I've known Joanne since 2018. And I was honored to be invited to be a guest lecturer in her school to speak to her graduate students, sports management. And before I get started to the rest of the story, let me tell you my last day, how stories affect me. Yesterday, I was coming back from London, back to here to France. And I had to catch the plane. I was catching a bus. Actually, we took Joanne and her family, which were wonderful. We took a bus to the London Bridge, and they were going off to somewhere else. So we said goodbye, au revoir, everything else, and bijou, bijou. And I had some time just to walk around. Here I am on the London Bridge. And I was just really looking for something to get something to drink. And as I turned the corner, I was in this place called Borough Market, which is like a big flea market in the area in, I guess, downtown London. And as I was walking around in Borough Market, tons of people, food, all types of different cakes and pastries, and what did the guy give me? He gave me a peanut brittle. Actually, it was a not peanut, it was a pecan and honey brittle taste treat. It was wonderful. As I came around the corner, I noticed in the distance that there was this ship. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, well, that looks interesting. And as I was coming around to the ship, I looked at the sign, and this ship wound up being the Golden Hind. And I was immediately brought back to what the Golden Hind meant to me. The Golden Hind was a ship that I first learned about when I was in the 7th grade. And we were talking about it. It happened in October 1974. So I was actually wasn't. I was 14. It was like seventh, eighth grade. I was 14 years old. It happened in October 1st when they was relaunching the ship to circumnavigate the Earth. The Golden Hind was the first British ship to circumnavigate the world. And I remember Mr. Sabino. Mr. Sabino was so cool. He was this white guy who always had. He only had one uniform: white shirt, black pants. He was always just thin. He was just very trim all the time, very well pressed every day. And I remember Mr. Sabino asking the class when we were talking about how the Golden Hind was going to re-circumnavigate the Earth, how many of the people in my class, how many of my classmates would go on this trip? And I remember that no one raised their hand. In fact, there were people saying, first of all, we were young, so a lot of the kids were like, yo, the Golden Hind, because it's spelled Hinde. So they were like, oh, the Golden Hiney. You know how kids are. But ultimately, he asked the question, how many of us would go? If you had an opportunity to go on this trip, would you go? And I remember being the only one to just raise my hand, and everyone was looking at me. And of course, I was the nerd in the class. I was really skinny and everything else. But I just raised my hand, and Mr. Sabino said, Barry, why don't you go up to the front of the class and explain why? And I was terrified. I was like, wait a minute. I'm already being teased and bullied and everything. Now you want me to go to the front of the class to say something different than what everybody else was saying. And I remember how, as I was walking up to the front of the classroom, Mrs. Sabino pulled me by my arm just slightly, just touched my arm and looked me straight in my eye and said, Barry, you can do this. He says, all you have to do is imagine that you're there. Imagine talking to Sir Francis Drake and imagine telling him why you wanted to go. And I remember standing there in the classroom, in the front of the class, and everyone was looking at me. And I remember saying, I don't remember everything I said, but I remember saying right then and there, I want to go, Mr. Drake. I want to go because I know that there's more to see in the world than Jamaica, Queens. I was living in Jamaica, Queens at that time, and IS 72. And as I saw the Golden Hind, this magnificent trip that I was currently on, not only just in London, but also in France, here I am, 63 years old. This is my birthday month. And that happened October 1st, 1974. And here I am looking at this ship 49 years later. And it dawned on me that this was the beginning. This was the beginning of everything that I do now. Part of that beginning, that once upon a time happened there. So I entitled this show, The Joy of Appreciating Your Value, because that's what I teach. That's what I want people to understand, how important their value is, how important your stories are. This was a trip, this whole trip, which started with September 28th, this whole trip has been just extraordinary. Just all the things that has happened. I got a chance to, 5 years later, I got a chance to speak to graduate students. And the question that I asked them is, what is your story? Why do you want to be into sports management? Why? And a lot of them were nervous. Hey guys, if you were watching, a lot of them were nervous. And as I told them, this is what I was talking about, guys. This is what do you do when you're standing in front of a person or people, and how do you tell your story? And I taught them, and we've done this in this program quite a few times, the seven elements of storytelling. Sound, get your piece of paper and pencil out, because let's do it again. Sound, passion, guys, and Amos should be saying it with me. Sound, passion, the hero, the antagonist, awareness, transformation, and sound. So let's go through that. The sound is the initial direction that you're going to take. So if you're going to begin to appreciate the value, the joy of appreciating the value of your story, you got to start thinking to yourself and reflecting on, how did you get to where you are? What started it? What was the beginning of your journey? Though the students of Amos who are interested in sports management, and you, my viewers who've been watching, again, thank you so much for watching each and every week. What is your story? What was the initial direction that you wanted to take when you decided to become a nurse or an administrator or a teacher or a mom? What was it? What was the thing what was that moment, that quintessential moment that you decided, or someone told you a story and you started to think, you know what, I can do that. I can be that. As I told you last show, when I was growing up as a kid, I wanted to be James Bond. I wanted to be Indiana Jones. Those movies, those shows, I wanted to be Mutual Omaha, Wild Kingdom. So for me, my initial sound, the direction was one of travel and adventure. I wanted to be somewhere else other than where I was. And you guys know my background and my mom and everything else. I just wanted to get out of the house, but I didn't want to just get out of the house. I wanted to get out of the house and do something and go somewhere, see things. I wanted to just experience just some of the things that I saw in my life. And the reason why recognizing and discovering the value of your story is so important. In fact, the reason why I can so easily link gemstones to people is because that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. I imagine when back in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, when guys like Francis Drake and all these explorers from England, from France, from Spain got on these galleons, got on these beautiful clipper ships and Spanish galleons, and they traveled the world looking for gemstones. I imagine what it would feel like to actually find that gemstone. And the reason why I can imagine that, because that's what it feels like when you finally discover who you are, discover what you can do in your life. I can't explain to you just how magnificent a feeling it is, how I felt on the bus ride, on the train ride, on the plane, coming here, and all the places I've gone in the last 30 days, how it felt for me to be here, to be at this moment in life. And you got to do that. You got to hear your music. You got to hear the sound. So many of us, I was telling someone, so many people in our lives, and so many people don't really take the time to see who they are, to see how far they've come. It always amazes me how people go on trips to different places and they'll do a lot of selfies, and you'll see them and maybe you see the background, whatever, but they don't really tell you the story of not only just where they are, or they may say where they are, but they don't say how it affects them. What was it like to see the Taj Mahal? What was it like to see the stand there at the Shard, the tallest building in Great Britain is the Shard. And I'll put all these pictures on Facebook and everything else. But the Shard is this beautiful triangular skyscraper that just stands alone. And as you're walking through England, and all I was thinking about was the history. I stood next to, it's called the Southwick Church. The Southwick Church, which is right in the Borough Market. The Southwick Church, beautiful church, cathédrale, as they say it in Francais. On the plaque, they were saying that this church has served Christians for over 1,000 years, and they had a list of all the people. Shakespeare was there, all these other people, Keating, with all these people in history that I have known and studied and learned about over many years of school. They were there. And not only were they there, I was there. I am there experiencing that moment. And we don't take time in our lives, many of us, to just see where we're at. We all know that we're going to die one day. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, black, white, male, female, gay, straight, whatever. All of us, one day, we will not be here. Richard Roundtree, who was Shaft, and so many of us grew up watching Shaft. Richard Roundtree has passed, 84 years old. And you got to start thinking, when you're looking at your story, you got to start thinking about not so much death, but what are you going to do with the time that you're here? Value, a story is the distance, is the space in between where you are, where you were, and where you are now. And everything in between that is their story. And that's how you get, that's the only way you get the value. You got to see it. You got to appreciate the moments in your life. What was your sound? What was the original thing that you said to yourself once upon a time that you wanted to be? Where did you want to go? It was an honor to stand in front of all these young men dressed so nice. I think about Max. Max is one of the students. Again, I wish I had the pictures. I will show you the pictures. Max was just so elegant, just very elegant. Max comes from the Caribbean and speaks French and everything else. Also speaks English. But what made him dress like that? What made him feel like that? What was his initial sound? All the students there who got into sports, got into being, wanted to decide to come to London, to come to Amos, which is one of the best sports management schools in Europe, really. What was your decision? Before, this is their last year before they graduate, before they go into the world. And I think it's so important for you to remember, what is the reason why you do what you do? Because when you get out there and you have to do those interviews and you have to do those resumes, you have to do the CVs and all those things, those are the things that's going to separate you from everybody else. Your reason for doing what you're doing is not everybody else's reason. It's not everybody else who's there. There's not the reason why they're there. Their reason is different than your thing. So, and that starts with your sound, with your initial direction. Passion. The next element is passion. What is your passion? Those of you who watch my show know that I'm normally very passionate about everything. And the reason why I'm passionate, as I told someone the other, that the reason why I'm so passionate is because I was homeless 32 years ago. I was homeless 32 years ago, living on the streets of Chicago. And as I've said to you once before, many times before, there was probably one of the worst experiences in my life. And it was also probably one of the greatest experiences in my life, because I learned how to appreciate things. I learned how to appreciate everything. So when I eat food, I'm appreciative of it. But when I eat food from France, I ate fish and chips in England. And if you can't, as I told Joanne, it was when I sat at that table, and here we are, we were at Joanne's house, and I sat around a whole group of French speaking people. Xavier, Joanne's husband, comes from Brittany, and all their friends and family. Everybody was speaking French, and I got 60% of it. I was catching no different words. And of course, Joanne was filling in the words. She was sitting next to me. And when she presented the fish and chips, I was like, now I'm officially in England. Because when you think about England, you think about fish and chips. And those are American fish and French fries. Okay. But they call it fish and chips. So that is their food. And I think the real flavor of life is just appreciating where you're there, that once upon a time, that was just something that you heard about. fish and chips. Or when you're in France and you hear about croissants or saucissons. Xavier and Lily Fleur was Xavier asked me, Barry, what is the food that you like? What is the food that you really like that you have to know if you're French? And I was just like, and the first thing I said was saucisson. And he was just like, yes, that's it. How did I get there? How did I get there? How did I get to understanding? We don't have, I mean, we have saucisson in at least in Chicago. You got to find it, but it's not like French saucisson. So the power of being here in France or being in London is that passion, is getting on that ship or that bus or that train and understanding that this is the place, this is here, you have gotten here, this is what you are experiencing, and maybe you might never experience it again, but you know forever this will be that experience. That's the passion. That's the passion you got to tell about your story. I was telling one of the students that when you tell somebody, if I was to tell someone that I spent 45 days in Europe, that I was in Spain, that I was in France, that I was in England, you can't just say, well, I saw the Eiffel Tower. I ate a croissant. I saw the London Bridge. That's not, I mean, it's more than that. It's more than that. I stood the second day, and this is the stories I'm telling is like an opal. An opal has, and this is where the similarities. The opal is so similar because each opal is different. Each opal, it's made out of silicon dioxide. You got those beads that are in a specific, in a specific or a different type of pattern. The beads are close together, and there's just enough light, enough space in between each silicon bead where light comes through. And there's usually a very thin layer of water. And when the light goes through, it bounces off the water, bounces in between the beads, and it refracts the light. And each opal manifests a different color. That is exactly what all of us have the opportunity to do. That's what we are. Millions and millions of people have traveled through London, but no matter how many people have traveled through London, their experience is not my experience. So your passion, when you're telling that story, you have to tell that story from a point of view of who you are. How did it reach you when you went to school, when you had your children, when you found that job? What was it like? That's the passion that you have to tell in your story. I had one of the students there who had been there for 5 years. A lot of students had been there for 4 or 5 years. And when I asked, why are you here? What does sports management mean to you? He did exactly what a lot of people did. He just told the superficial, the clinical, the textbook definition of what sports management is. And I'll tell him, and it's not I'm not trying to make him feel bad. Everybody does that. This is what we do, because in life we are often told things are so devalued that we don't think about those special moments. We don't think about that moment when there was once upon a time you didn't know that. Once upon a time you dreamt about this. Once upon a time this was a hope and a dream that you had, and now you're here. And if you just go through it without really thinking about it, and more importantly, if you tell people that story and they don't feel your passion, then it's kind of wasted. It's a wasted moment. It's just like, oh, okay, yeah, I was in France. Yeah, okay, great, nice. Oh, I got this job. Once upon a time, you wanted this job, and you begged and prayed and pleaded, please God, let me have this job. Please God, let me meet this person. Please God, let me go this place. And when you get there, if you don't remember your passion, then it just goes. So the second day that I was there, we with Amos, we got together. We had a little brunch, basically. And Joanne says, "You want to go with us? We're going downtown." And I was like, "Okay." And As we were walking the streets of London, again, walking the streets of London, I'm looking at all these different places. I noticed right off to, as we was walking down the street to the right, I looked at this, it was a ship. And I can see from the rigging that it looked real familiar. And I said, wow, I've seen that before. And as we were coming closer to the ship, you know what the ship was? The ship was the Cutty Sark. The Cutty Sark was, at that time, one of the fastest ships, clipper ships in the world. And for me personally, the Cutty Sark was very familiar to me because, again, my mom used to drink. There was two things that she drank. She either drank J&B or she drank Cutty Sark. So my whole relationship with clipper ships came from that experience. And here I am in front of one of the most famous clipper ships in the world. Here I am in front of this. So how many years, 40, 50 years later, I'm seeing the ship that for me used to be a source of so many bad memories. And yet here I am looking at it from a completely different point of view. That's what you have to do with your stories. You have to see your stories and see where you're at, where you were, and where you are now. What is the relationship that you have with that story? And when you get there, that's where the passion comes from. That's where the understanding of where you are in your life comes from. And that's when your life becomes more and more exciting, just like looking for a gemstone. When those guys got off, because it was mostly guys, when those guys got off the ship looking for that opal, looking for those emeralds, looking for those diamonds, it was the passion that they felt through that whole trip. Remember, this was transatlantic sailing. It wasn't the Carnival cruise line. It wasn't Princess Cruise Line. There was no turn down service. They were going to the bathroom in holes and guys, there was no deodorant things or this toothpaste. That's where, scurvy and all these other things. And when you see these old mariner sea-going stories, the guys didn't have proper dental hygiene. And yet, what was the reason why they went? Because they was passionate about what they were going to find, hopefully. And despite all the people, their friends that did not make it before then, they still wanted to go. Because for them, just the opportunity to hold a gemstone in their hand, to hold that ruby, to hold that emerald, to hold that gold meant more to them than anything was worth the possibility of death. That's passion. That's passion. That's what you have to have and see in your life, no matter where you are in your life. So sound passion. Then next is the hero. The hero. You have to be the hero in your own story. I always use Star Trek. Remember, those of you who watch Star Trek, remember it would always be Kirk, Spock, Scotty some days, McCoy, and then there would be the guy in the red shirt, right? Ensign Yeoman Jensen. Yeoman Jensen, if you watch Star Trek enough, you know that if he had a red shirt on, he ain't going to make it. He's not coming back. He's not coming back. So you can't be a character in your own story. I always imagine Yeoman Jensen getting the call over the microphone. Yeoman Jensen, report to the transporter room. Yeoman Jensen, report to the transporter room. And Yeoman Jensen said, damn, I'm not going to make it. Why? Come on now. I got a red shirt. They're going to some planet nobody knows about. I'm not going to make it. See y'all later. So many of us do this in our own lives. We do so many great things in our lives and we don't see it. We don't see how we're the hero in our story. And all you really need to do is sit back and look at it and create a soundtrack in your head, create some kind of music, see yourself moving through your own story. And if it was a movie, who would you be? So imagine how I felt moving through the streets of moving through the streets of London, thinking about all the James Bond movies I have watched over the years. And here I am in London, listening to the different accents, listening to the sounds, looking at the buildings, looking at walking through cobblestone streets that were there for hundreds of years. And here I am, a man that came from Harlem, New York, a man that's a nerd. Here I am, the nerd that wished and hoped and prayed that one day I'd see it, and here I am. Now, anything can happen, and maybe next year, maybe this is my last year. Knock on wood. That's not what I want to happen. But imagine how I feel right now in my life to be 60, to have spent my 63rd birthday on this planet. As people like to say, my 63rd trip around the sun, and this is where I'm at. You got to be the hero in your story. You got to be the hero in your story with your family, with your job, where you're at in your life. You got to be the hero. You got to see yourself as that. And when I say hero, I'm not just talking about Superman, Batman, but really when you think about Superman, Batman, why are they? They are people. They are human beings with extraordinary powers. Of course, it's exaggerated because it's a movie. It's a story. What's your power? What's your superpower? If you raised kids and your kids came out okay, you're a superhero. If you have a business and you remember when you started your business and how many people told you that was stupid. Oh, don't do this. How can you do this? And yet that coffee shop, there's a store right next to Amos called the Junk Shop. And I met the man at Joanne's party. Joanne is 50 years. Happy birthday, Joanne. and Joanne's 50th birthday party was the first day I was there. And I met this man, and he just looked kind of interesting, strange. And Joanne told me, and Xavier told me that he owned the Junk Shop. And this store was just literally like, it had everything in there. Like Sanford and Son to the next level. And yet he was obviously a mature man, my age, maybe older. And yet this is who he is. This is who he is. And how he survives, I don't know. I was told that probably more people bring stuff to him than actually come out with the stuff. But yet this man has a business in London that's functioning. He's living, he's making his way, he's paying his bills, he's doing whatever he has to do. And he's the hero of his story. And if we made a movie about who he is and what he's done, you would sit there and I'm sure he's made mistakes. I'm sure he's done good things, bad things, but that's his life. He's the hero of the story. And that's what you have to do. You have to think back about what you wanted to do. And if you don't do it, who's going to do it? Who's going to do it if you don't decide to do? When Joanne decided to come to London to be a part of Amos, to run Amos, it was a decision. She had her husband, her daughter, her children had to decide to be a part of that. So that's the hero. And when we come back, we'll just continue on with this process of how to find joy in appreciating the value of your own story. I'll see you on the other side. All right, we're back. And so hero, sound, passion, the hero. The next element is the antagonist. The antagonist is the most important part of the story. You do not have a story without the antagonist. And the thing about the antagonist is everyone goes through this. Everyone goes through something in their life. The commercial that we just had, breast cancer. How many people have had breast cancer and had to endure that, had to survive that? And they were blessed enough to survive that, that's the antagonist. And their life will completely change. When you're thinking about your story, when you're thinking about where you are now, think about all the things that you have already overcome. Think about how many bills that you had to pay, or the illnesses or the sicknesses and the bad relationships and all the things. And yet, despite all those things, here you are today. And in so many ways, you're stronger because of what you went through. As I told the students, and Amos, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, as everybody knows. Luke Skywalker is nothing without Darth Vader. If Darth Vader did not come in his life, that the option when he was standing on that precipice, Luke Skywalker, and Darth Vader cut off his arm. For those of you who saw the movie, which should be everybody, but when he cut off his arm and gave him a choice to join me, and let him learn the dark side of the Force or die, Luke chose death over the other option. That's what all of us had to go through. I saw a homeless man as I was walking through the streets of London. I saw, a few homeless people as I was walking through the streets of London on the train. And I can't help but thinking that once upon a time, that was me. That was me. And when I see homeless people, and sometimes I give them money, sometimes I don't, but the thing I always do is look them in the eye. And if I get a chance to say something to them, if our energies connected, I tell them all the time that I was there. I know exactly. In fact, I said that to a man when I was taking the train back to Gatwick Airport. There were two people. One was young, one was old homeless people who came and begging on the train, asking for money. And they were very polite, very British. It was funny just the way British homeless people are versus American homeless people. American homeless was like, this, ladies and gentlemen, and British people was like, excuse me, can I? I was just so in my mind thinking, wow, that's a different way of doing it. But the man sitting in the seat across from me, he was very looking at him like, oh, these homeless people. And I just looked at him. He looked me in my eye like, don't you agree? And I was just like, you know what? That used to be me. And he looked at me. He was like, what do you mean that used to be me? I said, that used to be me. I told him that, where I was, where I came from. And he looked at me and says, what are you saying? He couldn't believe, he couldn't put, I had my camera, I had my bag, and I had my flight jacket on and everything else. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, that once upon a time, that was me. And you don't know what their story is. You don't know how they got there. And just because they're begging on the train today doesn't mean that they're going to be there forever. Just like I'm here in London going back to France because I was invited to speak, to talk about stories. And I told him, he said, oh my God, that's amazing. I said, thank you. But I said, I hope my story gets you to look at other people who may walk on this train, who may not be where you're at, where I'm at, and understand that this is just part of their journey. Hopefully they'll get out of it. Hopefully things will change for them. But don't just throw them away just because you saw one chapter of their story. That's what the antagonist is. And when you're telling that story, you have to always remember when you're feeling down and out, when things are not working for you, when things seem like just everything is not working right. Remember all the things that you overcame to get to where you're at today. Yeah, I had a whole bunch of pictures that I wanted to show you today, and it just didn't work. And I just said to myself, okay, do I just not do the show? Or do I just tell you my story? Tell you what I've experienced? And when I got off the train, just before I got off the train, because he was going to the next stop or wherever, and he just said, thank you. And I said, you're welcome. That's the antagonist. And I couldn't help but think that maybe God put me there just to speak to him. Maybe, I was invited to do a workshop for a whole bunch of graduate students, but maybe part of that was to speak to that man who I didn't know. I don't know his name or anything else. He was just a man who I had an opportunity to tell my story in relationship to the story of the two people that were begging for money, asking for money, because it was too polite to even say begging. They was asking for money, and maybe his whole thing changed, or at least part of it changed, because he met someone who survived, so who overcame. That's the antagonist, and that's what you have to do when you appreciate your own story. That's what the title of this show is: the joy of appreciating the value of your story. I was touched and moved to be able to be at a point in my life where I can tell somebody that once upon a time that's where I was, and now you can see that I'm not there. And maybe now, the next time he's on the train and someone comes and asks for money, maybe he'll give them something. Maybe it'll just respect them just by looking them in the eye and saying, hey, you're a human being too. And I hope things get better for you. So that's the antagonist. So sound, passion, the hero, the antagonist, this most important part of the story. I'm telling you, if you have not gone through something in your life, which is nobody, unless you're maybe a baby, you don't have a story. Because everybody, and that's the thing that brings us together. That's what, going back to gemstones, every gemstone, everyone except maybe, well, no, you can't even say pearls. But every gemstone has to be found, has to be dug up. It's not just you walk down the street and here's a ruby, here's an emerald, here's a sapphire. Most gemstones don't look like anything before they're cut, before they're faceted. Every one of the students at Amos is a gemstone that has, over the years that have been studying at the school, they're being cut, they're being refined. They take their basic, what they are, no matter where they came from. It was a completely international group of students, and each one of them had their own story, had their own molecular structure of who they are as people. And they made this individually, they each made the decision to come to Amos, London, and to learn this, and they each one of them being faceted and polished and finished in a certain way. There's no different than a gemstone. Maybe they were rubies, maybe there was emeralds, maybe they're sapphires, maybe they were pearls, maybe they was tourmaline, maybe they was opal, but each one of them had their own thing that made them who they are. And they were polished and faceted in a way, and the way when they leave, when they graduate, when they go for their internships and go for those eventual jobs, they have to take what they are, the gemstone that they created, and present that to a team, to an organization, to show that the light that's inside of them is the light that will manifest, that will help that team win. I had the advantage. Imagine talking about stories, and not only did I see France lose the rugby cut of the World Cup of Rugby, but I also got a chance to be in England when England also played for the World Cup. And exactly, they lost to the same team. They both lost to the same team. France lost to the Springboks, and England lost to the Springboks by 1 point. And the championship is this Saturday between the Springboks and the All Blacks. And I was there. I was there to 2 World Cups, and it's actually being hosted in France. So imagine. And that's part of that story, which goes to the next element, which is awareness. Awareness is the most beautiful element. Awareness is when you realize this is not something you can do. This is something that you have to do. As I was going through this trip, through this journey, as I was sitting on the plane coming back to France, I sat there and it was all kinds of things going on. TSA, they got stopped for this it was crazy. But as I was sitting on the plane, I had my flight jacket on, and the pilot who was standing outside watching people come in, and he stopped me. He was like, "You was in the Marine Corps?" And I said, "Yes." And we talked. He said, "My son is in the Marine Corps." And he's just like, he told the flight attendant, he said, "Take care of him." And I had this whole aisle all to myself. It was really cool. But awareness is when you realize this is not something that you can do. This is something that you have to do. And all of us go through those doubts. All of us go through those doubts, just like in the superhero movies, where you wonder if your power, if your gift, if your dream, if the things that you want to do in your life, is that really the thing? And part of the joy of appreciating the value of stories when you realize, yeah, it is. It is. I feel such a profound sense of just happiness in my life, that all the things that I have done, all the things, all the doubts, all the misconceptions, all the internal struggles that I've gone through in my life has brought me here. Not only just here as a place, but here in my heart, in my soul. Do you know what it feels like to be able to communicate with people from another city, from another continent, from another culture, another country, and to resonate, to have people come to me after students, young people, young men come to me and thank me for something that I said to them? That's awareness. Imagine the people who cook and make food, and they present that food to you. That is, they at some point became, and hopefully became, aware that what their gift is as far as making food. I don't care what it is. It could be bread. It could be that taffy, that hard taffy the gentleman gave me at the Borough Market. It could be fish and chips. It could be whatever. That person became aware at their life that is what they wanted to do. Yeah. Joanne decided at some point in time that is what she wanted to do. As Allie was negotiating, Allie is like second in command, and I saw him watching and talking to the students and things of this, and Allie and his son was there, and I noticed that what I got out of that was just how you can tell in the way he was talking, this is what he wanted to do in his life. That's awareness. And it's such a beautiful place in your life, because it's like, if I made my transition today, if today is the last day, and again, I'm not wishing anything today because I got to go play petanque afterwards. But if today is my last day, to be honest with you, the first thing I would say to God is thank you. I can say that now. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to have lived this point in my life, to have experienced this. I want for nothing, because the things that I'm doing today were things that was only a dream. It was only a dream. I never even imagined the things that I'm doing today. And it's not about being rich, and not about it's none of that. It's just knowing that something that was in my head so long ago, back from Mr. Sabino's class, 7th grade, 8th grade, here is 50 years later, this is where I'm at. Wow. Wow. That's awareness. Transformation is when something that you have done in your life has touched other people. And if you're a teacher, if you're a mom, if you're a dad, okay. I saw Xavier working with Lily Fleur, and I love her name. He was talking to Lily Fleur, and just the relationship. I was talking to Lily Fleur, is 13 years old, and we was having this whole conversation about Chicago and Paris and things like this. And that's when transformation is, when something that you've done, something that you've seen, something that you have said to someone has changed the whole way they look at the world. That's what transformation is. When you look at products that you buy, you swear by, and everything else. When you think about food or clothes and things, that's transformation. That person believes that what you're talking about because you have told them that story. When I tell people about France or London and things like this, it's because of what I experienced. I stood at the prime meridian. I didn't realize that Greenwich, England was the same Greenwich, England that I have been talking about for decades as a navigator on C-130s. Navigation uses longitude and latitude, and prime meridian is the place, is ground zero for the planet. And I stood with Joanne. We went to the National Observatory, and I literally had my foot right in the line, and my left foot was on the eastern hemisphere, or my right foot was on the western hemisphere. And for me, maybe because I'm a nerd or navigator, that was a phenomenal experience. And I will tell people that story. When I tell kids that I teach about that story, those stories will transform them, hopefully, to want to see more in the world, to want to experience that feeling for themselves, to be next to the ship, the first ship that circumnavigated the earth. And maybe with kids that I teach, those children will be the first children that circumnavigate Mars or the moon or something. That's transformation. When something you have done changes someone else, and all of us have the power of doing that within our stories. And those of us who have children or teach children or lead people, those are what you do. That's what transformation is. And the last element before I go is sound. The first sound is the initial direction that you take. The second sound, the last sound, is what resonates. It's the things that people remember about you. And each one of us have a chance to create a sound that no one has ever heard. And so when you are speaking, when you are telling your story, don't just tell your story because, well, it's something. Create a sound. Take the music that lives inside of your heart and your mind, and literally tell people, be aware of what you're saying to people, because that music is the same, has the same effect as the music that you hear on the radio or watch on TV. You create a sound, and people, you will have a chance to change other people's stories because they heard your sound. There's so many people I think will go to France or experience France or see French people in a different way or because of the way I describe, because of my experiences of being here in this country, being in this culture, experiencing this, and having people like Joanne who said, "Hey, Barry, come to London and speak to my students." Wow. And some of those students, because they told me some of those students were transformed. Some of those students were transformed because I said something to them, my experiences, my background, the things that I've gone through. When I said that to them, they saw stories in a completely different way. So that's what it's about. That's how you begin to appreciate the joy of appreciating your own story. Appreciate who you are. Take the moment. That's your homework assignment today. I give you homework assignments every week. Your homework assignment today is to think about the things, the people that you've touched, the people whose your story has touched them, how they see the world differently because of all the things that you've gone through in your life, and you took the time to explain your journey. You took the time to show them that, yeah, it was hard. Sometimes you got your butt kicked, all kinds of other things, but you overcame that. And the person that they're seeing today is a manifestation of the things they've gone through, no different than a gemstone. A ruby, an emerald, a sapphire, all the colors that you see is inside. It's not just the structure of an opal. It's the way that things are put together and the way the light interacts with that opal. And the opal that you see, the beautiful colors you see, it comes from millions of years of all the light shining through in this particular way. And even though you're not a million years old, how does your light shine? How does your structure, how does your mind, your molecular structure, your mind, how does that interact with the light, and how does that light manifest for other people? So please tell me if it got something out of today. Again, I will send you the pictures and show the pictures, but I hope it's not even about my pictures. It's the pictures of yourself. It's the pictures of your story. It's the picture of your sound, of your soul, of who you are. So this is the last day of last Wednesday in October. Again, happy birthday to everyone, all my friends, family. Joanne, thank you so much for allowing me to remember my story in such a incredible way. And to all the students of Amos, good luck to you. I hope something I said touched you. And to my fans and viewers, thank you so much for watching the show. So until next week, as I always say, my name is Barry B. Mixon. I am a gemmological storyteller. And please take time, sometime in your life, to begin to discover the value of your own story. So until next week, au revoir, à te tella, voilà.